Okay, what's up, everybody? So, today I wanted to talk about a little piece of software that I think is absolutely amazing. It's come a long ways over the last few years. I've seen earlier reviews of this particular piece of software, and from what I can tell, the current version is absolutely fantastic. Now, the question you want to ask is how much do you want your footage to look like like it's from an actual film? Are you into having grain in your footage? Are you into replicating some of the most famous film stocks that you've seen when you go to the movies? Well, look no more. You can do this all in one click through DaVinci Resolve using this piece of software. We're going to get into it. All right, so what software allows you to replicate any film grade, any amount of grain, any type of film paper that's ever been produced, or at least the most notable ones? Well, good folks over at Dehancer reached out to me to review their product, gave me a 1 month license to try it out. And I've been having a lot of fun using Dehancer and kind of altering my footage and just making it look like it's right out of a film that's filmed on a movie camera. So I'm just going to kind of step you through my process on how you can use this program easily and effectively. I'm not an expert on color grading. I'm not an expert on DaVinci Resolve, but I think I figured out how to use this program effectively to make my footage look pretty cool. So I'm going to step you through the process right here. Now, I usually like to work in a four node setup. And so I got my first node right here. So you want to add a node. So you're going to go add node, add serial, or you can hit Alt S if you're on a Windows, Alt S, Alt S. So you have your basic four node structure. Typically with the first node, that's your exposure. Okay, so that's going to be brightening, darkening, lowering the blacks, raising the blacks, lowering the highlights, etc. The next node is going to be your contrast. Next node I like to use is for temp. And then the last node is going to be adjusting your sharpness or lowering sharpness, whatever the case may be, based upon your footage and what device you're using, what camera you're using. Now, if you're using Dehancer in DaVinci Resolve, obviously you need to have a fifth node. And typically this is where you're going to apply your LUT. If you're working in log, you're going to do your color space transform on this last node. But I'm shooting on HLog. It doesn't require a color space transform. I've already set my project settings to just convert it for me. You switch your color science to IRGB color managed. Color processing mode is going to be DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, which allows the widest range of color to work with. And then your output color space is going to be Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 because I am working on a Windows desktop. And anyhow, let's get into how Dehancer works. So Dehancer is going to be found under your effects where you're going to have your color space transform. Right now I'm looking at my favorites, but if you show all, it's going to come down here. You're going to see your color space transform. And if you keep going down here, you are going to find it under film emulation here at the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and just show my favorites. Now, just like a color space transform, you are going to drag and drop the Dehancer plugin onto the node that you want to work with. So you drop it on there. Now, don't be alarmed. It is going to be a pretty radical change when you drop it on there, but we're going to make some adjustments and we're going to make it look just right. Okay. So when you apply Dehancer to your footage, typically a lot of these boxes here, all of these smaller modules within the software are going to be enabled. And so what I like to do is turn off a lot of these initially, and then pick the ones I want to work with as I'm working with the footage. Okay. But the first one we're going to be looking at obviously is your source. It's already been converted to Rec 709, so we can just leave that as it is. You can adjust your color exposure, your temperature. You can warm it up, cool it down, your tint, defringe radius. But I'm not going to mess with those. I like to do all of my adjustments in my notes. That way any work that I do can be reflected downstream and I can isolate each node for micro adjustments as I go. So I can go back, adjust the exposure as I see fit. And you're going to see that that's going to happen here when you're working in Dehancer. So now here is the fun part. These are all of the vintage film stocks. Okay, and there's a few here that I really like to work with. Some of the ones that I really enjoy, there's some of the Fuji ones, Fuji Color 100, which gives it a nice natural look. Muted colors, looks very beautiful. And then it's really important that you come down to your print and you select, I like to use the Kodak 2383 print film or the Endura glossy paper, which will do that. And we're going to enable it. Now it's going to darken it up, as you can see here. So of course you're going to come back here to your exposure and we're going to lift it. Okay. And it's looking pretty good. Looking at my waveform, my blacks aren't crushed. I don't have any highlights that are peaking above the threshold. To me, that exposure looks pretty good for now. Okay, so let's go back into our dehancer. Now, film grain, this is the fun part. This is where you can emulate a film stock by adding the grain. So if you enable that, now you can see there's grain. So if we're running it, right, looks like a film. Now, I don't have a top of the line PC, so whenever I activate a lot of these, there is a little bit of stutter in the footage when I'm playing it back. So you kind of have to depend on just eyeballing each individual frame and seeing how it looks. Okay. I don't like to have too much grain in my footage, so I like to turn it down to about 10. It looks more subtle, more natural. So if you play that, it looks a little bit better. Or you can even go lower. Let's do 7. Now, another feature I really like to play with is the halation. So if you enable that, that's going to give your highlights a little bit of a glow. And you can select, what type. I'm gonna stick with 35 millimeter. As far as amplifying it, you can crank it up, you can lower it. I like to have it more of a subtle glow, so I turn it down to about 40. And then bloom is a very similar effect. It's going to give you kind of that ethereal um, glow to your highlights. So you can turn that up, you can play with it. So if you look at the window back here, it's a very subtle shift, um, but it's definitely helps, with the footage to give it that more cinematic film look. Now you can add film damage. So when you play the film, it'll show little bits and pieces of film damage, as though that's an older film that has been in storage. I don't particularly want the film damage, so I'm going to turn that off. And I'm actually going to turn off the film grain just while I'm working with the image. And actually, for this sequence, I do like just that cleaner, non-film look. Okay. So it looks pretty good. As far as my waveform, it looks great. Contrast, I don't think we need to do any adjustments on the contrast. Temperature, I love the temperature where it's at. It closely replicates the mood that I was going for in this. And then sharpness, I think I do want to adjust the sharpness just a titch. So we're going to come over here to our blur and we're going to turn down the blur just a little bit to restore some of the crispness in the image. So this is a shot of my daughter applying her makeup for a little movie that we made. But that looks very cinematic. Now, if you want to compare this to the original footage, I can deactivate my nodes. And that's what it looked like originally. And that's what it looks like with the Fujifilm film stock. Now, if you wanted to go for a different look, all of the different profiles here, you can just try out and click on them. So if you switch to like Kodak Gold 200, which is a very popular stock to go with, and you click on that, now it gives a completely different look. It's a lot warmer. You still kind of have that green tint, which kind of gives it that cinematic look to it. Whoa, I actually just switched off of it. Now, some of the other modules here, we have Film Developer. And this is going to be if you want to do your color, your exposure and your color boost, gamma correction within Dehancer. I can boost the contrast within Dehancer itself. We can lower the contrast to kind of give it that washed out look, or we can go heavier to give it a lot more mood. However, those adjustments I would rather do in my nodes, so I usually leave this one disabled. Film compression, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really know what this does. I have played with it, and I haven't really noticed much of a difference. I mean, I'm not a color grader, I'm not a film guy. So modules that I don't know what they're doing, I kind of just leave them alone. Expand, the expand option here, with this one, you can raise or lower your black point or your white point. But I feel like that's an adjustment you would make in your contrast and exposure. So I do like to leave that alone and do that on my own further upstream. Now, another feature that I do enjoy using is under, let's see here, it's under color head. So if you enable that and you adjust your highlights, midtones, what that's doing is that's taking your shadows, your midtones, your highlights, and you're applying color to each individual um, color spectrum. Okay. Now that's something you could do here in the temperature as well, or you could even create a new node and call it color, and then you can adjust your gamma, lift, and gain. But that's something that's fun to do within Dehancer. But for now, I'm just going to leave that disabled because I really like the way the colors turned out in this particular shot. Now again, Dehancer, it comes loaded with so many different options where you could, again, make adjustments on almost any variable that you would normally do in your color and light grading. But again, I like to just kind of do everything within the nodes themselves and only rely on Dehancer to select my film stock, add some halation, add some bloom, add a little bit of grain, and call it a day. But some of the other film stocks, just to get a look at them, because it's really fun to go through these and kind of see what you're working with. Wait, we're in print. Let's go up here to film. Some of the other ones I really liked was the Kodak Portra. For this shot, it's very blue, very cool. I'm not too keen on this look for this particular scene. I think with this one, I'm going to stick with the Fuji Color 100. I think that looks very natural, but also, it has just that. If you were to watch the movie that I made, it kind of like translates into the emotion that we were trying to convey in this scene. So let's try it out in a completely different clip and go for a completely different look. So I'm going to expose my clips. Then I have this drone shot. In the movie, this was a shot of Mexico City. And I wanted to go more for kind of a really warm, almost dry yellow, your typical cliche Mexico LUT, like a Sicario type color grade. So instead of creating all my nodes, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up my gallery. We're going to open up a preloaded sequence. Okay. So it's the same as the other clip. We have exposure, contrast, temperature, and sharpness. Um, so let's go ahead and add a node. And this fifth node is going to be for Dehancer. Now, in the movie itself, what I decided to do was to apply a LUT, and I actually have these film grade LUTs, and I actually have the Sicario one right here. So I just slapped it on there. And boom, there's your typical Mexico Man on Fire Sicario type dry yellow, very warm look. And then you can adjust it from here, of course. I could go into my key and I can lower the amount of the LUT into this. I think when I did the the film itself, I did 0.7 or 70%, which I thought was a sweet spot for this footage, and we color graded all of the sequential sequences with the same one. Now we're going to go ahead and try this outside of the LUT using Dehancer, and then we're going to go for a really filmic look here. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the node grade. We're going to go open up our effects, and we're going to slap Dehancer onto this node. Again, it defaults to this Kodak Vision 250D. It always does that. But for this one, I think that the Kodak Gold is actually a really great fit. Now, what I would do is here in the temperature, this is where I would manually add my warmth. So there we go. Now we have a very warm shot. Let's go back over to Dehancer. My film print, we want to switch over to the Endura Glossy, which immediately gives it a very like pulpy, filmic look. Now it looks like the grain has flipped on by default. And so if we play it, the clip is going to look like this. Now this could be footage from the 1970s for all we know, not knowing where it's from. This, easily could pass as the footage you'd see like in a 70s Bruce Lee movie or something to that effect. Now with the grain, I don't like to have it that high. I would turn it down to about 10 and play it. So if you zoom in on the buildings here, you can see the grain. Whoop, that's the next clip in the sequence, which we're going to get to in a minute. So let's open up our clips, go back to this one. Now, as far as like the other factors, I thought the exposure and the contrast was exactly where I needed it to be. I didn't feel like I needed to do any adjustments to the exposure. I mean, we can, if you look at the waveform here, all of the blacks are above the threshold, all of the highlights are below. I mean, we could stretch the highlights just a little bit. Let me zoom out so you can see the full image. We can lift it just a little bit. And then we can lower the grain just a tad, or lower the lift just a touch. Give it a play. And that looks pretty good. It looks very filmic. Now, as far as contrast, I don't feel any adjustments need to really be made to the contrast. If we raise it, it does give it more of that vintage 1970s, which is kind of the look I'm going for with this sequence. But I think for this one, I'm just going to leave the contrast as is. Now going back into Dehancer, I do want to turn on the halation. And I want to turn it down just a little bit. Bloom, we can turn that on and turn that down just a touch. Now if you play the sequence, it looks good. Now what I want to do is I want to take this look and apply it to my next clip in sequence. This is of my daughter, and she's essentially loading up her backpack, and she is making a break for it. One thing I do want to do is stabilize that footage. So we're going to come in here, we're going to stabilize it. Much smoother. Now we're going to go back here to our grading. And a cool little trick is if you want to apply the grade, the node tree, and all the adjustments from a previous clip to this one, what you do is you highlight the clip you want to alter, and then on my mouse I set it to the middle button, and I click on there. And I think that's the default keyboard setting for DaVinci, is you press down on the scroll wheel on your mouse. Now it's been applied. So I'm going to go ahead and hide, I'm going to hide the clip so we can see the image better. Now that's very, very warm, probably too warm for my tastes. We did warm it up dramatically here in the temperature. I'm going to drop it just a little bit to about 100. And then if we're looking at here, I do want to remove the grain while I'm working on the image. So let's play it. Now again, when you're running Dehancer and you have a lot of um, the smaller modules enabled, on a lot of computers, mine included, it's more difficult for it to play it back to review it. But you can kind of get a feel for what it's going to look like. And again, this kind of aligns with the previous clip. Let's pull up the previous clip. So if we were to play this clip in sequence, and then switch to the clip of my daughter, there's continuity. They match each other. It's the same setting. You would think it's shot in the same city, which of course it wasn't. I do want to adjust the sharpness just a little bit on this one. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make it a little bit sharper. As far as the contrast, I think I want to adjust that a little bit there. I want to bring down the gain, so we're going to go to our exposure. We're going to bring down the brightness just a titch. So comparing this to the original footage, compared with the adjustments that we add, it kind of looks like that desert, gritty Mexico look that I was aiming for with this shot. So again, so if you go here to review it, start on the first clip, we can watch the whole thing in sequence. Oh, shoot. Then we switch locations. We're suddenly in Mexico. In the movie I did, there was a big splash of font saying Mexico City, like you would often see in big budget movies. And then we have the shot of her fleeing the scene. So anyway, that is a little bit of what I've discovered using Dehancer. Again, it's an awesome, awesome tool. Now, granted, you could probably replicate a lot of this on your own if you have the knowledge of what famous film stocks look like. I don't. This makes it extremely convenient. You can essentially do it in one click, and you can scroll through all of the different, like I showed you earlier, you can scroll through all of the different uh, film stocks again and pick out the one that works best for your scene that can convey the emotion that you're looking for, because a lot of emotion and storytelling in film, that one actually looks really good as well. Super 100, that would work great for this scene. But a lot of what you're able to convey when you're telling a story through video is through the use of color, right? And Dehancer is able to do that. It's able to give, even cell phone footage or GoPro footage, that filmic look that kind of just adds that overall polish to your finished product. But anyhow, this is my review of Dehancer. I hope that it was useful to somebody. Again, this is an awesome product. I'm not getting paid to review Dehancer. They were kind enough to give me a 30-day license to try it out and record my thoughts. Is this a tool that I would use in my day-to-day processes? Definitely yes. I think that if I was taking a whack at making a serious film, you know, um, and submitting it for review, or just making it just to make it, I think Dehancer would be a fantastic option in your toolkit. Anyhow, let me know your thoughts. And also, I do have a link in the bottom. If you do decide to pick up this product, use that link, please. That'll give me just a little bit of kickback, which helps out. Will buy me a coffee. Anyhow, have fun making stories, being creative, making art, and we'll see you later.